So this giant, ridiculous poem that was by far way too long and unfair um, was by Williams Wordsworth. It's about his like this place above the Tintern Abbey, which is a church. Essentially, in the first stanza, which is lines 1 through 23, he's describing the area and he's describing like how the abbey is like set into like this kind of like hilly area with like a mountain in the background and like this river, and how it's kind of like nestled into a bunch of trees, which is it makes it sound very peaceful, and it makes it sound like it's very hidden. It's kind of a place where you can get away. That's kind of what I took away from his description of it. And that's the first couple lines 1 through 23, and then lines 24 through 26 are, though absent long, these forms of beauty have not been to me as a landscape to a blind man's eye. I thought that was a really interesting couple of lines, because a blind man, has never seen any landscape, and I feel like by saying that, he's sort of saying that, like, that's, like, the landscape that he would think a blind person would imagine as, like, the perfect landscape, where you're kind of not inhibited by, like, things you've seen before. It's kind of, like, unique in a way, I guess, more unique than any other place, because I think that's what the description kind of puts forth. And he's saying that even though he hasn't been there in 5 years, he's saying that though absent long, these like the forms of beauty haven't been to me. He's saying that even though he hasn't been there in a long time, he's like thought about it and he's like recalled what it looks like, and he's like found peace in that. And lines 27 through 50 in that general area, I got a quote that says, "Felt in the blood and felt along in the heart." He's sort of saying that even though he hasn't been there in that long, and even though it's still like in his memory and it's not like physically a part of him anymore, he's sort of saying that it's still like a part of who he is. And he's kind of saying that because he's been there before and he really likes it there, and he feels like that part of that like that area, he has a lot of deep connection with that place and memory and stuff like that. And so he's saying it's kind of like made him kind of who he is. And then lines 32 through 34 of unremembered pleasures, such perhaps as may have no trivial influence on the best portion of a good man's life. He's saying that even though like the good times that happen there are still in his memory, I think he's trying to say that the pleasurable memories don't really make you who you are. And in that, he's trying to say that, like, yes, this place is peaceful, and he does retreat there in, like, really bad times, and it does help him feel more at peace with the world. He's saying that the experiences overall that in your life kind of make you who you are. And I thought it was interesting because he sort of says that he kind of brings up the idea that the best part of a person's life are the nameless, unremembered acts that he's done, like to better someone else, or that's like really brought peace to something. And I thought that was kind of cool. Jeez, this can go way longer than 10 minutes. In body become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy we see into the life of things. Lines 47 through 50. I thought that was really interesting because it suggests to me that when you kind of stop thinking about the world in a way of like, oh, this like has to happen to you, bodily pleasures, which are all just like money and like the deadly sins and all that. When you stop thinking about those and those stop becoming part of like who you are and what you want to do, you become more at peace if you do things that like will truly make you happy instead of just trying to follow those like basic instinctive needs. I think he's saying that he's done that, and by like recalling the memory of this place and of nature, he's kind of found like this peace with himself in the world. And there's another line that I thought was cool, which kind of suggests that before, when he left the place, when he was there 5 years ago, he was different than he is now. And he says, flying from something that he dreads than one who sought the like thing he loved. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of like before, when he was in that place before he left, his life was about trying to get away from something or trying to do it for something else. And I think now that he's come back, he's just like thinking about it more of like, oh, I should do it because I want to reach for something that I want to do and something that I love, which is a good thing to do in life, in my opinion. The anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul of all my moral being, which is kind of him describing the feeling he gets from that place, I think. And that's like more in depth to the more tranquil feeling that he gets. And it's like, well, this place and my like entire life have added up to what I want to do and who I am. And I think he's kind of saying that like the experiences that he's had build upon how he acts, and all, like living life is important to know how to live life in a way, which is kind of confusing, but it's also very interesting. He goes on to describe his sister, which I thought was interesting. He's kind of just like, oh, my sister who's all about happiness and joy and about like, you know, being happy with everybody in the world and hasn't really experienced much. I feel like through that he was sort of saying that that's how he was before he like left for 5 years. I just thought that was interesting. There, after many wanderings, many years of absence, these steep woods and lofty cliffs and these green pastoral landscapes were to me more dear both for themselves and for thy sake. So I mean, I think that those are the last lines of the poem, the very end. And I think he's kind of saying that even though like I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. He kind of thinks of it more as like it's a place, right? It's an actual place, but because it's in his memory, it kind of like builds up more than what it actually is physically. You know, it becomes more of a symbol to him than anything. And I think that's interesting because when you think about like your memories and stuff like that and things you've done, most of the things are like, oh, well, I've definitely learned from that. And I kind of think that's what he's trying to say. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about because that's definitely something most people do with their lives. And the message that I took away from this particular poem was that it's important to kind of stop and think about where you've come from, and it's important to find peace in that. And that if you're in a place like currently where it's like kind of like rough and loud and noisy in life, then you can kind of reflect on how your life was and you can take peace in that. And I think that's his overall general message that he's trying to display, which I thought was interesting. It was kind of confusing though. It was super long. It was kind of. I was just like, what? It keeps building. But it was good. Yeah. What else can I talk about besides this ridiculous poem? You have no idea how long this took me to do. I actually thought it was kind of interesting because it came in 3 parts. Like, I thought the first part was like, it was him describing the actual place and kind of what it looked like. And then it was describing what the place kind of meant to him. And then it kind of went into more what he took from it after line 50. And then eventually starts describing his sister, like I said, after line like 110 or something, which I thought was kind of interesting. She doesn't really describe her physically, she just describes her emotionally. I have 57 seconds to continue rambling. Yeah, and there's a line where it's like, if solitude or fear or pain or grief should be thy portion, with what healing thoughts of tender joy wilt thou remember me? It's kind of thinking like, he wants to be the place that he's remembering to his sister. Like, he wants to be the thing his sister remembers and looks back on with peace. Which is another message you take from it, which is like, if you should live your life trying to make someone like happy with you, but you should be happy with yourself at the same time. Interesting. Very interesting.